So, for those of you who are chiming in now, I had a fun bug a second ago where it was getting all chipmunky. And I have no idea why that happened, but I restarted my various programs, and then I unplugged and plugged in my mic, and that fixed it. I think it might have been because I was doing some emulation. I was playing Phantasy Star, which I've bought like 8 times, so I have no qualms about emulating it. And the emulator had a weird sound setting that I kept accidentally toggling, so I figured that probably caused the problem. Either way, we're back. All right, so we're modeling hair in Blender. I got this plugin that was recommended by Danny Mac, and it is spectacular aside from the inability to automatically assign UVs, which means that cleaning up at the end is going to be a pain in the ass. But still, it's better than most. And what we're doing right now is I'm just trying to find a decent hair shape. Since I am not doing a subdivision on this, the hair shapes are really, really spiky. If I turn subdivision on, which I think I can do down here, I may have to do it as part of a new curve. I guess they have to be... I don't want any fall off, so no tip. Shape subsurface modifier, there it is. So we're just going to go ahead and try that all again. So there we are. We're going to delete this one. Boop. And then over here, we're going to grab this curve and we're going to assign it a taper object because I don't like... That taper is bizarrely sharp. I don't really like how sharp it is. It doesn't feel right. So we're going to just use our own taper curve. There we go. And then once again, we'll edit the bevel, but let's move it a little bit so we can edit the bevel better. Doop. So I think that this is scaled. I guess not, because it's not unscaling, but this bevel should be a new beveled curve. Oh, no, that's not what I want. Yeah, there we are. That's what I was looking for. So what we're going to do is we're just going to scale up this entire thing and scale it down on the z-axis, and then we're going to try and make it into something hair-like. And to do that, we're just going to do a little bit of subdividing here. And I went over this before, so pardon me if I'm going through it fast now, because I don't believe that the way I went through it before was actually audible. I had a fun error. Yeah, so you can see the difference between what I was doing before and what I'm doing now. The subsurface modifier takes a lot of the aggression out of these, the placement of these elements, which means that they can be placed more aggressively, since the aggression doesn't matter as much. But if we do it like this, that'll give us a kind of hairish shape. And then we can just hit finish. There it is. Finish the edit the bevel. There we are. And then this is the actual curve in question. We're going to just modify the curve so that it starts at 0, 0, 0. And that's easy because that way our center can actually be our center, which kind of makes the point. It can be the base. The base of the object can be the base of the hair strand. And what we're going to do is, this is the hairstyle sets that I created before. I don't think we need you. But here's the one I created in like 10 minutes to test this system out. And today we're going to create a different hair set, not that one. But you can see the sort of quality you get out of it. In order for that, you're going to need to have it with a material. We're just going to grab this Toon hair material. The reason I'm using a Toon hair material is because there's no UV mapping. As I said, this doesn't do any good UV stuff yet. So all of that's going to have to come later, if at all. What we're going to do right now is we're going to create a kind of a floppy, close to the head haircut. There we are. And so with this in mind, we can just edit the curve until that haircut feels natural. We can also add additional points in the curve if we need to, but basically, I don't think we're going to need to. I think we can just play it nice and short here. The only question is whether or not we can get it to feel right on the skull, and I think we can. It's just a matter of choosing the right size for these things. Now you can see that what we've got here is a curve that is a little bit flat at the end. That's because that's what I wanted for this hair over here. And we're going to just pull this curve over to that hair so that they're linked up. And then we'll duplicate that curve, bring it back, and we'll tell this strand to use the new curve. And we'll name this curve Bezier Curve Sharp. And then what we'll do is we'll edit it until it is down at 0 here. And that'll give us a nice curve that actually goes to 0. Now the problem with this is, of course, that it's super sharp. What I'd really like to do is to have it fork apart at the end, but we're going to have to do that using another technique. That's fine, though. We'll live with it. The other thing we're going to want to do is I think we're going to want to bring the base in quite a bit more. So we'll just draw this down, pull this up. I don't believe this axis matters. No, it doesn't. There we are. That's better. And now if you have tried to make hair in Blender before, then chances are you are aware of how powerful this basic technique is. Being able to edit splines is so much nicer than having to manually edit actual meshes. That's always been just a nightmare. And that's why nobody makes hair using actual meshes. They either use cards or, well, I mean, the body element can be an actual mesh, but you don't want to make everything out of an actual, like, hand-placed mesh. You just want it to work. And we're just kind of going across here. I only want to give the impression of what we're going to want in the end because I'm just testing to make sure everything's going to work. At this stage, it's not important that it actually look good. I just want to make sure that it's not going to be a disaster. All right, so with that in mind, we're going to go ahead and start on the back of the head because that's generally where you should start. No, there it is. This place here is the part that gets hidden really, really easily by top elements, and then it becomes hard to edit. So it's better if you can get the back of the head to look right before you do any of the rest of the hair. Now, if you're working with hair shapes, which we don't need for this particular hair, I don't think, but if you're working with hair shapes, you're going to want to build the body shape before you do any of this crap, obviously. So like if you were doing a ponytail, for example, you'd build the mass of the hair for the ponytail, and then you'd add this crap in. But we're doing a really short, flat cut close to the head, so we don't have to worry about that. We'll build maybe a ponytail next. Subdivide here. Oh, I mentioned a lot of stuff, and it's no longer part of the stream because the stream was chipmunky gibberish. I threw a hissy fit last time at Unity because Unity has been crapping all over its asset store and all over its devs and hasn't got its act together in the slightest. And I talked about switching to Unreal or something similar. I haven't really decided what to do yet, so this is just me going. I'm just going to be doing Blender today. No game engines at all. But switching to Unreal is probably not the best option because I have a real hatred for Epic, and I momentarily forgot that Epic is Unreal. So I don't really think I'll be going with Unreal just because it's not good to work with a company you hate. So I don't know what I'm going to do. I might go back to Unity, but I'll have to hand edit, hand manufacture every single shader, which is kind of a pain in the ass. I could switch over to something like Godot, but if I do that, then this game will have to be reprogrammed from scratch, and I'm not sure that I'd even reprogram this particular game. I might do something else. And I don't know enough about Godot to really say whether or not it is a good fit with me or what, So, if you guys have any opinions on that stuff, let me know, because I am currently opinionless. But I'm still pretty upset at Unity. Their shit is not together. So you can see how placing this kind of hair is really pretty straightforward. It's a It's just a process, and you get a feel for it. And once you get a feel for it, it's just almost a meditation rather than a modeling thing. Now, the way that this can work in the end is I can have each of these strips be their own mesh, or I can use a combiner, a union combiner, to actually merge them together into a single mesh, or some combination of the two. The problem with with an approach like this is it has a high poly count if you are just going for converting this straight over to a mesh. But it doesn't have as high a poly count as using a particle system would, because when you convert a particle system over into a mesh, every single one of the strands has to be its own mesh object. That's not ideal, but that's how it is in all of the tutorials I've read. It's like, oh yeah, turn it into a mesh object with 10,000 lines, each of one of which has several verts in it. And once you've got that mesh object, then you can, do a twist or something. It's like, no, that's like a million faces for your hair. That's not going to fly. And this can produce a million faces for your hair. It's all about, knowing what the heck you're doing. And I don't. So it's going to be a process, I'll tell you. Because this is the big thing that I was worried about when I started to do people, is I was worried I would not be able to handle the haircuts, because the haircuts are definitely the most complex part of this setup. Maybe not complex, but the part I have the least experience with. And if you saw my haircut in real life, you would know that. Lapis says, I hate Unreal, and using in Unity is associated with too many bad games. Lapis C says, Boolean all the hair strands together and then decimate. That's exactly what I'm going to do with these. But when you're doing particle effects, that's much, much harder. When you're doing actual like mesh fronds like this, it's considerably easier. Anyway, what we're going for with this haircut is it's all just going to come out of a single point and radiate. And that'll be a nice, easy haircut to start with, you know? So you can see how we've got gaps here and there. We'll fill those in. I'm not too concerned at the moment. But I am concerned with getting the actual... Okay, so the problem is this. There we are. Let's just pull that down a little bit, and then we'll come over here and flip it. So Unity being associated with bad games is actually not a problem for me, because I appreciate that most games are bad. I like people producing bad games because it means that it's easy enough to use that you can, have a complete newbie produce games. But that's how it used to be. These days, Unity is not very well maintained. It's really falling apart, and that's why I'm considering what else to do instead. And Mifaz says that the bad games were from an era where Unity had, the free version of Unity was pretty shitty. That's true, but it's also misleading, because you can do pretty shitty games in any version of Unity. Speaking from experience. Obviously, the free version of Unity's limitations are going to affect an awful lot of devs, because most devs use the free version of Unity, and I am certainly going to start using the free version of Unity. Regardless of whether I keep using Unity or not, they are not going to get any more of my subscription money. That is something that they have lost the right to. They're not doing a good enough job to make it worth my while. They've cost me more than $1,000 in the past month, so fuck them. Lapis C says they're making their own engine. I've done that in the past. The problem is that once you start making your own tools, you, at least I, usually become a tool maker rather than a game maker. I love making tools, but since nobody ever uses my tools, there's no point. I don't have a team that I'm supporting with my tools or anything, so I need to be careful not to let tools distract me. And they would, because I am a crafter of tools. I love tools more than I love making tools more than I love making games. And if I had an option, I would just make tools and let people create games with them. I don't really have that option, so I'm not doing it. Oh, I think I can just... Yeah, that's nice. Okay, I had forgotten that I had that capability. If you hit rotate twice, if you hit R twice, it starts to rotate... if you hit X twice, rather, it starts to rotate on the local X-axis, and same with local Y-axis and all that stuff, which is nice, because it means that regardless of how you've got it rotated, you can rotate it relative to the actual object's capability. So, for example, see? And as long as your object is straight, that's nice. My object is, however, not straight. Well, we got one little strand here that's not playing well. I'm just going to delete it. And you can see how this is such a patchwork. It looks fairly awful, right? But this is the sort of thing that gets turned into a base mesh, and then we add in the additional elements. Now, one of the problems with this base mesh is this large bald spot, which I knew was going to exist, but it's a little bit larger than I want it to be. So I'm just going to adjust it until it isn't quite so bad. I need to hide that skeleton if I want to make very much more progress here. What an interesting direction. Trying to figure this out involves twisting, which is not something that comes naturally to me because it's not how you do it in a lot of other systems. Still, it's good enough. We got a few little pop-through elements. We're going to want to hide those, since if they pop through here, there's a high chance that they'll pop through in the final mesh as well. Do 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 do. All right, now this is more like the kind of bald spot I was willing to work with. It's much less aggressive. Because obviously what we're going to do is we're going to hide the bald spot with a patch of poppy uppy hair, because that'll be cute, right? It'll be poppy uppy, and that's always cute. Obviously we're going to want to use a Boolean on this particular element of hair, because it would be a little bit much if we had all of these strands, because that's just supposed to be the base shape, and it ends up being 10,000 polys. It's not going to fly. All right, so there is the most basic shape. And once we select all of these hair elements, which I think I can do easily enough by simply selecting everything here, and then deselecting the body. Oh, I guess is it selected? Yeah, it is. No, that's supposed to be a deselect there. There we are. Just make sure we've got just the hair here. It looks like it's just hair to me. And then what we'll do is we'll go down into the curve, and do I have to select? I do. There we are. We can just do it to a union mesh, which uses the other plugin to create a unified mesh like this. And then we can go into sculpt mode and sculpt that down if we'd like to. You can see that what we've got here are 12,000 faces, 13,000 faces, which is far too many. But what we'll do is we'll duplicate this and put one of these aside in case we break something. Elboechi says, hello Elboechi, welcome. We're making hair today, and that's all we're doing. So we're going to go over into sculpt mode, and we're just going to tell this to make sure that we got the right object. Yeah, just going to tell this to use the adaptive topology, which I believe this is it. Yeah, there we are. And I think that's correct. And then we'll just do a little bit of smoothing to get rid of some of the excess detail. Do you just hold shift for smoothing? Is that it? Yeah, okay. So we'll just wipe away some of that detail here. And when we're done, the result is a little too high poly. It's actually worse, substantially worse. And I think that's because our dynamic topo is really detailed. So if we take the detail size down from 12 pix to, is it up that makes it less detailed? I can't remember. Optimize. Did that not work? And then we enter in here. You can see how it's still really huge. Am I misunderstanding how dynamic topo works? I probably am. I haven't really used Blender's sculpt mode very much. Is there another option? So Lapis C says that 2.8 has hair collections. Well, I'm using a plugin right now that does the job really well, so I've been hesitant to try to use 2.8 now that I've learned a pretty good approach. The plugin I'm using is not yet compatible with 2.8 as far as I know. So I was thinking about waiting until this plugin was compatible before switching, because this plugin is really nice. It just lets me quickly do all the fronds as one object each. Either way, I can't seem to figure out how to get the dynamic topo to actually be small. So that's 42. If we make this 50 pixels and then optimize it, get nothing, no change at all. So it doesn't actually do anything. So apparently dynamic topo doesn't actually get applied until you start to change things. Is that it? No, even that's not applying it. I don't know what applies the dynamic topology because it doesn't seem to actually work. You need to click flood fill. All right, so I think that's how it's called. Is that within the dynamic topo system? Like, is there a flood fill option here? There's no brush flood fill. Now in ZBrush, all you have to do is go click, and that actually does the job. But it doesn't appear that that's going to work for this, because for some reason it's not simplifying. I kind of need it to. This should be very, very simple, but of course it's Blender. Jojo says that it's Wednesday, which is definitely the case. So I can't figure out how to get this to actually apply. You have to switch to constant detail, and then there will be flood fill. Aha! There we are. Thank you. That's exactly what I needed. I guess constant detail needs to be higher as more detailed. Let's try it. Yeah. So we're going to want a detail of maybe 15. Yeah, so if we go in, we can see how that's... we've cut down the faces to 5,000, which is still too high. So we're just going to undo that and set it to 10. And detail flood fill. There we are. That'll be high enough. Once we've softened it and put a texture on it, it'll be fine. And that's only 3,000, 4,000 faces. It's still a little bit high. It's not. It's 6,000 faces. Why is it so many faces? Well, I suppose we could do a decimate on it now that it's the right shape. Not supported in dynamic topo. Well, stop being in dynamic topo. There we are. There we go. And you may be thinking, that's really ugly. Yep, that's fine though. We're going to go ahead and turn it to smooth, and then we're going to add in the actual hair elements. Nice palm frond lol. Yeah. The whole point is that they didn't actually have palm fronds in the old in Blender. I had to find a plugin for it. I don't like some of this nonsense that we've got going on here. I guess it's just falling below the skull, which is less bad than the alternative of it being a hole in the mesh. Now that I've done this, however, I can safely say that this was the wrong way to do it. I just did it to see what it was like. So we wasted a whole bunch of time, but that's fine. That's what happens when you are trying to learn how to model something. So what we're going to do is we're going to do it the old-fashioned way, which is we're going to duplicate some of this and punch it out. And then we're going to make this the mesh for the hair. And this is just going to be a body mesh. So what we'll do is we will simply go in here, change it over to using hair. Don't need either of these. And then what we'll do is we'll just make this the right shape for the kind of hair we're talking about. And part of that is going around the edge. You know what, we'll go around the edge afterwards. For now, we're just going to go into sculpt mode. And we don't need dynamic topo. Good, no dynamic topo. We'll just use the grab brush to pull it into... nope, that's a smooth brush. That's the grab brush. He's asking, Jojo is asking if they are called palm fronds. I don't know. I am notoriously bad at hair, but I'll tell you, this grab brush doesn't seem to actually be doing anything. Is there some reason that you suck? It doesn't appear that anything does anything. Is the sculpting turned off somehow? Why is the sculpting not working? What's going on? The sculpting shouldn't just randomly break, should it? Is there a mask I can't see? JoJoJet says that the head mesh is probably blocking it. Well, I'm not trying to model the head mesh, so why the heck is the head mesh blocking it? But that's not good, because if the head mesh can interfere with me modeling a completely separate mesh, then that means that it's going to just continually get in the way whenever I try and do anything. Wow, Blender, you really... Nope, no, that's not it. It's something else. What? Oh, you know what this is? I know what this is. Look at this. I forgot about all that shit. So we'll just... There we go. That was it. All right, much better. I forgot that I have a whole bunch of shit attached to the head, and so it's not just my head, it's everybody's head. And all we're really going to do is bring this out into spikes, because that's the basic idea of this haircut. It's just a bunch of forward swept hair, or just generic swept hair. And what we're going to do is we're going to bring it forward, and then we're going to shrink wrap it, because that's the easiest way to get it to fit properly. Nope. Try again. Nope, too long, too long. And so we're going to go back out here into object mode, and we're going to scale it up a little bit, and then we're going to tell it to shrink wrap. Oh, we don't want it attached to the modifier. Let's tell it to shrink wrap. Shrink wrap to the skull. And then we're going to give it a little bit of an offset. Yeah, that's probably fine. We'll just hit apply. And then we're just going to go around the edges. Interesting choice on this edge here. Apparently we have some pretty bad damage to this particular vert, so let's go ahead and fix this. Because that wouldn't have worked. That should be close enough, though. So we can select the outer edge of the entire thing. Like that. And then we'll just extrude and bring it in. Why is it? Why is it pulling? What the fuck is going on? Why is this not properly extruding? Look, it works fine when I do it like this, but then the moment I tell it to shrink, things go wrong. So extrude, shrink. What the hell is going on here? All right, well, let's bring it forward. Or to the left and forward, whatever. Now we'll shrink it, and now we'll bring it back. I don't know what the heck that was. It looks like there were some verts getting stuck on other verts, which doesn't make any dang sense. Either way, that's a skull cap that we can live with. It's much more low poly, and we can add our fronds in now. Unfortunately, our frond setup there needs to be deleted, and we need to start over. It's not that big a deal. Just got to go back in and do the job again. With no radius fall off. Set it up properly. Yep, that's right. And we'll just pull it out. And once again, we're going to move this to 0. like so. And then we're going to just unrotate this and shrink it down, shrink this down, and assign it to, where is the bevel? There it is. The fact that you can't move the screen while trying to eyedrop or something is bizarre. That's fine. There we are. So Mifa says transform orientation low. I think he said that a long time ago. Sorry, I wasn't paying enough attention. So we're going to just edit the bevel here. Nope, there we are. And once again, this is just going to be a matter of scaling it up and then scaling it down on one axis. And then we'll just create some sub elements here and give ourselves a nice little bit of curve to our hair, just to make it feel a little bit less unnatural. Now, this time I think what I'm going to do is try and get something like, looks a little bit like a soap bar or something. I think that's too fat, so let's just shrink it on the z-axis a little bit. And then we'll pull this up. Yeah, that should probably be okay. I get the feeling that it's not quite right, but it's hard for me to tell what's not quite right. Either way, it would be nice if there were options for combining different bevel elements, but it's still better than most of the things I've seen. We'll just go ahead and mark this as done. Switch over here, add the hair, and then move it into position and start modeling. We're just going to put one back here, and then we're going to just get to work. So basically, we're going to have to do the stuff we did before again. Now, this opaque area is going to be textured, so we don't have to worry too much about it being completely wrong. But we still want it to have the elements that we need it to have to make it look right. As before, I'm going to do a little bit of the front to get a feel for it, and then I'm going to do the back. This time I'm going to be really aggressive about keeping them all from the same location. Jojo Jet says, did you make the hair pieces behind her? Yeah, this was my 10-minute test, actually probably more like a half-hour test, to see whether or not this approach would work. And it worked fine. The only problem that we've got with it is, let me show you. The only problem we've got with this is that it's not UV mapped, which means that unwrapping it is going to be a pain in the ass. But if I'm doing a pure tune approach, I can use concavity maps and a couple of other things, and then it'll be fairly straightforward. But if I'm trying to do hair that looks proper and good, then that's probably not going to work out. Jojo Jet says it looks like Life is Strange hair. That it does, now that you mention it. I wasn't thinking about Life is Strange when I was making it, but yeah. That's like my default test hair element, because it's got just the right amount of body versus scraggliness. It's not a giant thing of hair, but it's also not so simple that you can do it with anything. But I say that as if I've got a lot of experience with it. I don't. Not really very good at hair. So what you see is pretty much my first set of attempts. There we go. So the bevel is a little bit small. Let's go ahead and fix that. We're going to edit the bevel again. I mean, we could just scale up everything, I suppose, but I think it makes more sense just to scale up the bevel. The downside is that once you scale up the bevel on all axes, there we are. That's better. The whole point here is that the object is supposed to be the main element that you see. You're not really supposed to notice the hair underneath. It's just there to make sure that it's got some safety, fall through, so you don't have to cover every single bit of the head. All right, so now we're going to duplicate, and we're going to leave the hair in the same spot and just move these front elements. And that should work fine. All we have to do is make sure that these elements are tilted properly. That's not proper. That is the exact opposite. There we are. We'll just rotate here. And you can see how they're kind of levitating off the skull a little bit. That's not great. So we'll pull it down, and then we'll bring it around. And you can see how we've got pop through. And that's something that we're going to have to deal with. Because that at this stage, pop through will actually be noticeable. These things are vulnerable to pop through, so we need to make sure that you don't get any. So this kind of pop through is fine back there, but we don't want any pop through up front. I'm still not 100% convinced that this haircut is going to work out. I sort of started off just as a test, and I'm not at all sure that it is the kind of hair that will work with this approach. It might be something that requires a slightly different setup. Maybe I should try a ponytail instead, because I've done ponytails before and they worked out pretty well. I was trying to do something simple, but that may have backfired, because simplicity is not necessarily something that actually goes very easily with this kind of hair, you know? So it might be that simplicity is the exact opposite of what I want to do to show it off or test it out. Okay, so it looks like I need to have a little bit more pop here. And we're going to have this come over the ear. There we go. Oh, and come way in. That's like floating a foot off of the skull there. That's where. If we want to do that, though, it makes more sense for this to... Well, I guess we can just tilt it. That's probably fine. So we can, in fact, just scale x -1 on these things. But as you can see, if you've tipped it, it's not going to work out. So there is really no way to gracefully scale x -1 unless you start off that way. So we're not going to. We're going to manually create all of these elements. Won't that be fun, right? Yoink. I can change the transform orientation to global. Well, you know what? I'm not sure I can. Let me show you. If we grab this object and then we, first off, if we scale x -1 here, you can see how it's not actually scaling on global x. It's scaling on some internal x that is also global x. It's really bizarre. Because of that, none of the factors actually work out. And if we apply the rotation, you can see how it ends up looking like this, which actually isn't a bad idea if we were going for a really small ponytail, but it doesn't really work for what we need here. And the problem is that there are several different types of space involved here. It's much more complicated than your average object. So it has things like twists involved, and that's something that is not as straightforward as you might think. JojoJet says it is a user-made plugin. Yeah, and I mean you can claim that this is because it's a user-made plugin, but if you do the same thing using actual Blender-based technologies, you get the same problem. The problem is because of the way that these curve elements interpret their bevel shape. So it's not that the user that created it is inept. It's that the bevel shape has weird rules. Um, just trying to figure out how to get this stuff to not look terrible. And these flat haircuts, I'm so used to doing them as meshes. I thought I would try and do them like this. And I don't know whether or not that's going to work. It may very well be that this is one of those things that really is just easier to as a mesh, you know? Sorry, I'm getting into the spirit of it, which means my brain is turned off. JojoJet asks if it's normal to spend 99% of your development time picking names, variable names. So believe it or not, I think that is a sign of a programmer that is just starting to come to grips with software architecture. As distinct from programming. I think it's a good sign, and it's a temporary thing. It doesn't last. It's a phase that does not last forever. So. Oh, I can. I don't think that's going to work. All right, so these are the basic blocked out shapes that we might want. And what we're going to do now is add in the detail shapes. This is something that I would usually do using alpha meshes. In fact, these would all be alpha, transparencies. But this doesn't really support that. So we're going to be doing, we're going to be doing it just using simpler bevel curves. And the way we're going to do that is we're not going to use a subsurface modifier because it would make them too dense. And we're going to go ahead and just increase the scale X on this so that it's a little bit more reasonable. That might be a little too big. And then decrease the scale Y. And then we're going to assign our taper. There we go. And that's actually pretty big. Let's go ahead and bring it down. And notice how it recreates the whole thing, so I have to reassign the taper, which is fine. There we go. That's still really big, so let's go ahead and bring it down. Now that I think about it, I could just edit the bevel. I don't have to keep doing this. Yeah, let's go ahead and just edit the bevel. There we go. So this bevel is supposed to be fairly simple and small and straightforward, so that's what we're going to try and keep it to. But the density is in the wrong spot. So what we're going to do is we're going to adjust it until the density feels right. And having some asymmetry in these is critical. So that's what we're doing now. We're just going to bring this in like so. Yeah, that's probably fine. And that's going to be our detail mesh. We're going to just go over here, tell it to use the toon hair, and then we're going to edit the object here. Is it 45 degrees? It is, and then we're just going to lock it forward. And then we're going to select both of them and scale them down. Can't do that. They're scaling separately, so we're going to scale them independently like this. There we go. And we're moving this back, keeping it separate so that in case we need it later. And then what we can do is we can just add any number of these detail objects that we need. We're going to be using them to hide areas that are not great, and we're also going to be using them to spice up edges, since our edges are really pretty plain right now. So for that, we're just going to, I guess we'll start up front. And basically the whole concept is to try and make it so that the hair doesn't look like it's made out of just a couple of specific meshes, but instead feels much more naturalistic. I think we're probably going to need to, well, let's try and keep it to just 2 elements because that's easiest to edit for us at the moment, but we may end up having to do some pretty aggressive editing to get that to work. So when we create this stuff, there's obviously a lot of stuff that we have to take into account, like whether or not it's popping out in the weird spot and stuff like that. But most critical is that we have to make sure that it feels like it is making these strands of hair feel like they are actually made out of hair instead of being made out of Play-Doh. Which is something I wish there was more of an automated option for, but there's not, so we're not going to complain about it too much. So for example, if we do this, you can see how it creates a nice little element that feels relatively natural and creates a little forked off bit. Jojo says, is this hair supposed to be slicked back? No, it's the exact opposite of slicked back. It's combed forward. So we're not creating a slicked back haircut here. If we slicked back, I'm not sure what we're going to do about slicked back haircuts, because normally those require, normally how I create them is to use an alpha element for the forehead, and I'm not really sure how to do it without doing that. We'll experiment with that as soon as we're done with this one. So what we're going to want to do here is create the same sort of motion. Yeah, like that. I guess we'll start this one all the way back here. We're going to need an extra little bit of editor here just to make sure it all works out. Pull that out, pull that up, make this work out here. Just, and the idea is that this can fold along this edge where we've got this really ugly crease and just kind of hide it. Yeah. A little bit too close to the tip there. I think that is a little bit too tipped. That's not too bad. And now we're going to do one that is from our downstairs neighbor. Just grab it and move it across. Oh, come on, Tip. There we are. We don't want it to look exactly the same, though. So when you're doing this, you've got a lot of options as to how you would like it to look less repetitive. And one option is to use a different mesh. Like I can change the bevel cut, but I think that making it have a different vector is more important. But the problem, of course, is that you don't want it to cut through any of the existing meshes because that'll look really dumb. So I'll just pull this down. Actually, we can even just pull it forward, make it quite short. That'll also change the taper fat level, which will be nice. So we'll just make this work. You know what? I'm going to go ahead and put this off to the side, and maybe we'll come back to it later. So once again, I can just bevel a box select the entire set and then deselect the person and then move it off to the side here. Just do that. Well, let's go ahead and create a judge that says, is there an option to have it only create the top half, or are you going to delete all the bottom faces? So the bottom faces are relatively low poly. I'll probably leave them in most haircuts due to the way that that works. I guess we'll just delete that one. So if we're going to be creating a ponytail, there's obviously a lot of options, but the basic issue is how the mass of the hair is going to look. And for that, we are going to go ahead and duplicate the scalp again. This approach is, the most basic approach for modeling hair. And we'll punch it out like that, and then we'll go into it, and once again, we're going to need to delete all of these shape keys. There we are. And we'll come in here and tell it to use the tune hair and delete these two. And what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to turn on X-axis editing and pull this into the right shape. For now, let's just hide the, there we are. Hide that, and then turn sculpt mode on here. Use the grab brush, turn on X-axis symmetry, and just make a nice fat soft brush like that. Increase the radius. Grab it, pull it down, pull it out. So here's the thing. We don't have to worry too much if the edge falls off of the head, because we're going to be bringing that edge in with an extrude or something similar anyway. God damn it, I'm too used to ZBrush, where pressing S changes the size of the brush. Pressing S here changes it to a smooth brush, which really isn't what I want. So now if we go into the editing proper, we've got some stuff that's not quite kosher in terms of topology. I think we can just go ahead and smooth that away. I think that's just holding shift. Yeah, so once that's done, we'll change to the inflate brush and just pull it off of the head and give it a little bit of body here. Yeah, that's probably about right. Give it a little bit more. All right, so now that we've got that set up, what we'll do is we'll just grab the inside of this area, as we did last time. In fact, we can just delete half of this since this part is symmetrical. The actual decorations won't be symmetrical, but this part is. So we don't need the armature map. There we go. And I think that what we're going to want to do is turn on some proportional editing and pull this area out just a little bit so that it's not quite so flat to the skull. And then we'll just turn off proportional editing. Now the advice here is that you should look at references when you're creating your hair. And I do recommend that. I am not, and that might be why some of my hair looks absolutely amazingly awful. So, you know, don't be like me. Do it right. So what we've got here is a hairline that's really far forward and off the ears. I think that's probably too much. So we're just going to grab this like so. And we're going to delete these verts, and then we're going to pull this part down. And then we're just going to merge these 2 points. And that'll create our nice tight mesh, but with a higher forehead. So once we've got something like this, we can easily add in our objects for the actual ponytail element. Now this is a very loose ponytail. I think it's probably too loose. Let's go ahead and tighten it up a little bit, which we'll do with the move brush grab here in Blender. Yeah, that's probably a little bit better. Let's drag this down a touch. There we go. All right, so now it's a little bit tighter. Not tight, but not so loose that it looks completely sloppy, right? Let's go ahead and turn off sculpt mode, and then we'll create ourselves a nice curve. There it is. Pull that out a little bit. And then we'll just go ahead and rotate Z45, pull it in, shrink it down, and that's a oh, God damn it, I forgot to tell it to bevel that. Yeah, thanks window, and fuck you. Everything is giving me pop-ups today. I turned off Steam because it was popping up. That's where I put my work critical notifications, like the server just exploded. And for some reason, everyone is sending me messages there. Like Steam was like, you've got an important update. 20% off of a game you don't want. It's like, come on. And Windows is like, you've got an important update. We want to reboot your computer because fuck you. Come on, guys. That's where work goes. Don't randomly put shit there that nobody cares about. So we'll use a subsurface modifier here. And then we'll just do the exact same thing we did before. Anyway, now that Windows is giving me that, critical update thing, I expect that I won't be able to use Unity again for quite a while, since it always breaks Unity. So we will see. I think it'll probably turn on all the monitoring again and probably force me to use the asset store again. I'll turn all that shit off again. Really looking forward to that, let me tell you. My favorite shit, undoing all of the crap Microsoft insists I take. All right, so we're going to go ahead and do a bevel edit and make this into something that looks a little bit hairy, which I believe what we'll do is we'll just subdivide here. And then we'll subdivide asymmetrically here. And we'll create ourselves a nice little set of faces that feels right in terms of feeling like it's, got the depth of hair. Yeah, that's probably fine. Let's go ahead and put it in and see whether it works. Oh, I've got to tell it to stop. Doop, 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 doop. Finish editing the bevel. It's probably too small. Let's just scale up the entire bevel. Yoink. There we are. That's better. Now we're going to tell it to use hair. Hold on. I've got to turn off my oven. I'll be right back. Exciting stuff. All right, so let's go ahead and start to create some hair elements. Now, when we're doing stuff like this, we've got a couple of options as to how to do the actual ponytail. And And one of those options is to use these kinds of strands, right? The problem with that is, of course, that the ponytail will end up being really high poly. But I think that's probably fine. So let's go ahead and try it out and make sure that, it feels right. The only issue with that is that we don't actually want to use this for it. Let's duplicate this, move another one in here. And the reason is because that the bevel we want for the ponytail is going to be curved. Excuse me, it's going to be curved sharply upwards like this. Because otherwise it won't feel right? So we'll just pull this up and then we'll start to edit it until it feels right. So if we scale this up, it can actually be the body element. There's no reason why we have to have a mesh that's not, that's not the right mesh. So we'll just go ahead and punch this into shape here like that. And that's going to be our core element. Now let's go ahead and add in some smaller elements. Oop, that was wrong. There we are. And these smaller elements are going to just fill in and create some nice texture wherever we happen to need it. So to do that, we'll just... What's going on here? Is there another object? Okay, there is apparently an object inside. I don't know what I did. I must have hit Alt-D somehow. That ponytail seem a little bit low? Yeah, it might be. It's hard for me to tell. Let's go ahead and move it up even further. So once we've got something that's roughly ponytail shaped, the idea is that we use these fill elements to make it feel like hair instead of like clay. And that's harder than it might seem. What's going on here? That's not how it's supposed to rotate. That was weird. The main problem is that after consideration, I might not want to use that curve twice. Let's delete that one. We'll use this one and see whether or not we can get this to fill it in proper here. Oh, that was what the problem was. So basically, if we were going to, we could create a stripe that ran along the outside here. Now the problem is that it doesn't have the mid shape that ponytails tend to have. It's very flat. You see that? But you know what? We can give it a mid shape. All we have to do is tell it to have one. With a little bit of a subsurface subdivide. There it is. And then we can just pull this up like so, and there we've got it. Now the problem being, of course, that this is a very fat curve. The curve in the middle here is quite thick. So we don't get the same sort of feel that we might get out of a curve that's tapered on both sides. And it may be that we need to change the bevel curve on this. Yeah, so this isn't going to work. Let's go ahead and start in with the rest of the hair just to see whether or not maybe this shape is not good and I have to fix the shape entirely. So what we're going to need to do is create an edge to our hair. And that's going to be something that we're going to use the tip of these to do, I think. So let's go ahead and try it out. So you can see here we've got it upside down. We'll just flip it right side up, and then we will try and give this a shot. And what we're going to want is we're actually going to want this to fall down into the hair back here. But you know what? I think we do need double taper. I think that's the trick for this guy. So we're going to take this and move it across here and duplicate it, bring it back. We're going to call this Bezier curve taper. And then this is going to be attached to that. And then we're going to come down here and we're going to pull this down to 0, like so. And that's going to give us this double tapered look, which I think is going to be more useful to us. And now I've said this a couple of times, but in case you are just chiming in, I don't know how to do hair. If you have hair techniques, let me hear them. And if you don't have hair techniques, then you and I were in the same boat. Let's go ahead and just hide that shit. Right. So basically I'm going to use this tip as the tip, and we're going to keep the tip exactly where it is because that's the easiest way for us to get a feel for that, right? And then we'll just move this back end to wherever we need it to be. And obviously this back end is pointed the wrong way, so we'll just bring it up, extend it out. Now that we've got a double taper, it shouldn't be too hard for us to figure out an ideal setup for this. Should it run all the way down to the other? Yeah, I think it should. So what we're going to do, I'm going to extrude and pull this down. There we are. Move this to the back of the head where there is a natural low poly element that we need to avoid. And then we'll move this forward and up. There we are. And you can see how much extra space we've got, so we'll just bring that in and that'll be fine. Got a little bit of a problem right there. We'll just pull this back. Basically, it's that one little bump right there that we're trying to avoid. But it's not that big a deal. We'll just bring it in. I've got just a tiny bit of cut through here, just a little bit of extra bits. There we are, that'll do. Now I'm not sure whether or not this is the right approach, but it's an approach that seems feasible, so we're going to try it. So when we go in here, we can select all of them and then twist them like so to create a correctly aligned setup. And then we'll move this middle one out. And then just bring it down a little bit. Yeah, like that. And then we're going to have to bring this end piece in. I'm not sure that this is the right way to do this. I'm actually not sure how this works. You know, in a professional sense, I'm not sure how professionals do it. Let's put in some sloppy overcrosses here. See, when I normally do this, I do this with a mesh that's got an alpha transparency. And wow, I just do not know how to do it without relying on that. It doesn't feel right to do it like this for some reason. It's probably okay, but I don't know. Is that gonna look good? I guess it depends on if I texture it. Well, I still got a couple of people in chat. Maybe they can tell me what they think. Oh, I was just wondering whether or not this hair seemed like it might be bad. It's hard for me to tell what's going to look good because this is a toon style hair, and that's just not something I've ever done before. I mean, I'm not experienced with hair in general, but toon style hair is specifically something I've never done before. Whereas the rest of the hair I've only never done because I'm a hobbyist. You know, I've done it. I just haven't focused on making it good. You know, I think it's going to be okay. Hair is usually much tighter. Yeah. So the issue here is that I don't believe... Let's go ahead and hide this for a second. If we take these, let's just go ahead and tight enough to give them headaches. Yeah. So let's go ahead and duplicate this, pull this across, grab these. And what we'll do is we'll create a merged mesh here, like that. Is that just, no, that's like every one of them separate. I don't want that. I want a merged mesh. There we are. And then what we're going to do is we're going to try a modifier. Doop. Okay, so what we've just done is we have snapped the hair to the head, and you can see how awful that is. What I really want to do is just do it for a vertex that's not 100%. I don't remember how to do that. I've got vertex groups, but I don't remember how to assign them. I mean, I know how to assign them. I don't remember how to select the underside of each of these. It seems like it might be a little tough. I guess what I can do is just hide the edges on all of them. And then just select the tops on all of them. No, that's H. That's L. And it still is doing everything because I guess the front point and the back point count. So we'll just select faces. It's still selecting everything because there's a face that's not... Why is it selecting everything? This is really obnoxious. Okay, so... Never mind. Jojo says you could select all and then deselect from above. I don't know how to deselect. There, that'll do at least a little bit. Right. So if we do that, we can add that to we can add that set of verts to a new vert group. I think. And then we can just test and make sure that that worked. Yeah. And then if we were to do this with a specific vert group, it would suck that vert group down. What I really want to do, though, is keep the top group relative to the other group. And I don't know how to do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to invert here. And then can I get it with a weight of 0.6? Assign. And you can see that what that does is it creates a sort of partial... It's not going to work. I don't know how to do this. You know what? I'm going to have to think about it because this is not working out as well as I had hoped. And a big part of that is probably that I need to use reference photos. But I'm stuck with this idea that I need to have a body of hair and then use flyaways. And I don't believe that that's what I should be doing with this approach, because I'm thinking about it, and I'm thinking that it might make more sense. Just get rid of that and get rid of that. It might make more sense to build the entire hair out of these elements. Now, this was obviously just a quick test. It's missing a lot of decoration here in the back. But compared to what I did today, this looks much better. And I think it's because today I was obsessed with creating the base body. And I don't think that I actually want to do that with this approach. Delete the top sides and then use the solidify modifier. Well, the problem is I want to keep the vertical density, this weird shape that I've got going. So if you shrink wrap too aggressively, it flattens it to the surface. And even if you flatten it to like 1 inch above the surface, it'll still be flat. Really, the actual option there is not to use shrink wrap. It's to model against the head in the first place. So let's go ahead and give that one more shot. Let's do one more thing before I call it quits for today. We're going to try to model close to the skull and see whether or not we can do away with the basic idea of needing an under mesh at all. And maybe we'll have like a skull cap coloration or something, but we won't have an under mesh. We're going to want to use probably this many rather than what we were doing before, which is no big deal. It's not going to cause any serious problems at all, unless we're dumb, which, you know, we probably are. All right, so, oop, that screwed up. There we are. I want to zoom in. Thank you. Boy, that took a lot of cajoling. I was focused somewhere. What's going on? I must have pressed the wrong button, and that's why it was all... So there's a certain amount of thickness to this, but I think what we really want to do is give it more thickness. So we're going to edit the bevel and then just make it big, like that. And that'll make it a couple of things. It'll make it more forgiving. It'll make it fewer of them have to be created to cover the skull correctly. It should just be a better time all around. Jojo Jet was referring to the ponytail. I think, yeah, I got that. I think I don't think I was confused by that. So you can see we've got a little bit of pop through, and basically, if this is going to be the lowest hair element, I'll be surprised. But we'll start with that, and then we'll just start to create some nice hair, hopefully. So what we're going to do is we're going to twist, and we're also going to move these center elements out of true and bring them down. And basically, we want to make sure that we don't have this kind of streak, that we're not trying to create a mohawk or Pepe Le Pew. Now, because we're trying to create hair, I think what we're going to want to do, hair that's supposed to be tight to the skull, I think that what we're going to want to do is actually edit this bevel one more time and create just a little bit of a vertical rise in the middle here. Not a whole lot, but just enough to help it fit to the shape of the skull. Because as it was flat, and we were getting like a lot of rise elements, and that's not what I wanted, so it was not working out. So let's just go ahead and try again. And you can see that we've got some pop through, but it's not extraordinary. It's not gonna feel awful when it happens, but it is a sign that we have a little too much coverage. So we're gonna just nudge it so that we don't have to have quite as many bands of this to create full coverage. I guess that'll do. Now, if we scale x -1, because we didn't actually do any rotation, it more or less works. It's not quite right, because I think we did a little bit, but it's much closer than it otherwise would have been. So we'll just drag these in. Actually, I think it did work, and what's different is that the middle piece is not actually down the middle like I think it is. Still, what we can do is just massage this until it stops arguing with the other strip. There we go. And then we'll just duplicate it, bring it down. And then we'll just tilt and then adjust all of these elements. And this is the first time I've ever tried to create a hairstyle out of this kind of giant hair frond approach. It feels very strange because I'm so used to thinking in terms of optimizing that, you know, this is much less optimized than a skull cap. But I might not need to worry about that as much as I think I do. I frequently over-optimize, and I don't think I need to. I think I can get away with a lot less optimization. Oh, well, that's a little bit too much body, I think. JojoJet says, what's the final art style of the game going to be? That is a good question, and it really does depend on what I can do. I have a problem where the art style I was aiming for requires specific shaders, and I have those shaders. In fact, I have 4 of them. None of them compile. Unity broke all of them. So that's why I'm so pissed at Unity right now. So I can't even make them again because the thing that allows me to make shaders, Unity broke, and I can't get it to work anymore. So I don't know. I'm kind of back at square one as to what sort of art style I want to aim for. One thing is clear, though. If I can make hair in this toon style, this 0 alpha blend hair, then it makes sense for me to pursue a hair that, or it makes sense for me to pursue a toon style throughout, so that I have, you know, not a human, not a realistic face and then a toon haircut, but just toon throughout. In which case, it would probably end up looking a lot like most modern toon style games in terms of the visuals of the face and the hair. What I want to do is dissolve verts. There we are. But that is by no means some kind of final decision on the matter. If you have ideas, let me know. It's just that I can't do all of the things I was going to do, so I'm kind of stuck. To be honest, I don't have anything against the toon style. I'm not one of the people who thinks that toon styles look bad or anything. It's just that for sci-fi, my brain is stuck in realistic mode because I grew up on Star Trek, which had actual people in it. So just for me, sci-fi never felt toony, you know? But I'm pretty sure I could get used to it. Why is there a divot there? What's going on? What's with this fold? Is this just too big of a... No? Let's cut it. That was weird. Oh, that's what it was. Okay. I was having weird problems with getting that to work, but it was just because this was actually pointed away from the skull in a weird angle. Jojo Jet says, I think Life is Strange would be pretty good. Sure. So the Life is Strange style is a light toon style. One of the problems with the Life is Strange style, not from a how it looks perspective, but from a how it is to implement perspective, is simply that the Life is Strange style is a lot harder to implement than you might think. If you've played any of the subsequent Life is Strange games, you know that they don't look quite as good. And the reason for that is because the original Life is Strange had hand-painted textures. Now, there's no reason I can't do hand-painted textures, aside from a general lack of painting talent, but that's something I actually could do. I have painted before, it just has been a while. And I don't mean like, painting in oil paint and then scanning it in. I can just fake it using a digital brush. But that sort of style does come with a lot of restrictions because that hand-painted texture has a lot of personality to it. And if your hand-painted textures blend in or don't blend in very well, then that means that every character that has that texture is going to remind you of every other character that has that texture. So when you've got something like a situation like I've got now, where it's a fairly realistic face, and then we just use like blend shapes to make it work, then you can get away with that because the blend shapes don't have anything to say. They're not completely linked to a specific face. But once you start to add in painted textures, it becomes a little bit more difficult because it's just so iconic. Still, that might be worth doing anyway. Oh, that wasn't a hole. That was just a dot. Okay, that's fine. So Jojo Jet says they liked Captain Spirit and LIS2. Really? So I haven't played. When I say the sequels, I'm really just talking about Before the Storm. I haven't actually played Captain Spirit, but it looks like, just looking up the. So Captain Spirit is not really very painterly. It's using a lot of soft brush techniques. It's got the same palette as the original Life is Strange, but it hasn't got the really, really iconic brush-stroked visuals. It uses a much softer and more realistic technique where it relies on subsurface scatter shaders to create the skin texture. If that's the style you want, that's actually a little bit hard because I don't have the shaders for it. That's not the style I was going for, but it has the same kind of fairly realistic skin. So the boy is a bad example, but his father, that's the sort of skin that you could expect to see out of the way I was going. The problem is, of course, that the way I was going no longer exists because Unity broke everything, so it's hard for me to go that way anymore. I don't really know what I'll do, but it's certainly worth taking a look. Well, the original Life is Strange had a lot of visual issues with it. It wasn't all sunshine and happiness. And, it would be disingenuous to pretend that it was just perfect. But it had a lot of charm. And a lot of that was just because they were willing to do ridiculous textures, like hand painted textures that were just, whatever, right? And it really worked out, but that's just not something I've done. I'll have to think about it. I could probably do it. Anyway, this is starting to actually come together. Yay. So what we're going to do is we're going to reduce this down to just 2 and bring it in. And what I'm doing here is I'm creating the back of the head, which is something that you generally want to do first. But I did not do it first. Now, the problem with this is that at this point, we need to stop using the double bevel. I guess we can still use it, but we need to be careful about how we use it, because we're no longer, this point here that I've got stuck in the ear, it doesn't really make sense. We need to be careful to make sure not to accidentally imply things that we don't want to imply about where the hair is going and what the hair is doing. And I guess the best way to do that would be to tuck it in underneath these other strands of hair. Like that. Yeah, that's actually not too bad. Can we scale x -1? Let's see. It would be nice, because this is annoying, getting this hair perfect. Yeah, okay, good. That one worked. So we'll just tuck this in, like so. And that'll give us that nice little bit there. Got just a tiny bit of pop through, which I'm going to pretend doesn't exist. So now what I've got to do is add in the bulk of the hair for the back of the head, which is something that everybody recommends you do first, and there's a reason for that. But that's okay. For now, we're just going to half-ass it. And I think I only need 2 points. I don't think I need the full set. So just bring this up and back. And then something like that. Pull it over. This is actually not too bad. Just need to make it work right. So I think if I scale this up, yeah, that's actually not bad. If I pull it into the neck, then it will be just right. So the only issue with this is, of course, that it's higher than these other objects, and that's because these are a little bit too low. It's no big deal. We'll just, no, that's not, there it is. Just pull them back until it is underneath them. There we go, something like that. And basically, we just need to do that a couple more times to finish covering the back of the head. It might be better if I actually inverted it and used this down at the back of the head here, and then I can grab here. Can I? Okay, I can't bring this back to the origin with just a easy peasy thing, but that's okay. We'll move it. And just try it on for size. And basically all we're trying to do here is get it so that it covers the back of the head entirely. So if anybody else has opinions on how things should look or can look, or, I mean, the same person again, it doesn't matter to me, just keep letting me know, because this is the sort of thing that's going to keep, being a problem or being a consideration for quite a while. And so it's good to have a continuous stream of opinions. Why is this not... Is one of these not pointed the way I think it's pointed? Huh. You'd think that that would work. I guess it's just that this needs to be... I guess it's just much closer to the skull than I thought it was. So you can see that we've only really got one little thing wrong, and that's this here is not quite right. So we're just going to move it until it feels a little bit better. We're having some issues with the strands falling through each other, but that's a really good opportunity for us. Anytime we see damage like that, we can consider how to soften the damage by adding in more detail. And that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to create a new curve. And this one is not going to be a subsurface modifier. And it's going to be a simpler curve that's just for decoration. Once again, we're going to want to use the same bevel taper object. And we're going to want to make sure that it is hair. And then we're going to want to edit this so that it is... rotate Z45. Come on, rotate Z45. And pull it in. Pull this out, I guess. Shrink, shrink, and edit the bevel. So here's the bevel for this particular hair, and basically we don't need any more detail. We just need to arrange this so that it's more in line with what we would like. And what we would like is something that swells in the middle, but not a whole lot, just enough to be noticeable. Like that. And then we're just going to take that and we're going to use that to decorate. Let's go ahead and put one back here for later if we need it. We're just going to use that to decorate all of these edges that seem like they are bad hair, because they are bad hair. And, you know, we don't want that. So we may need to use more points. It might not be something we can do with just 2 control points. But, you know, maybe we can. It's going to be tough. Let's go ahead and just add another control point. There we are. With an extra control point, we can make it a lot tighter to the skull. And that'll be a little bit better too. But we have to make it so that it doesn't make matters worse. It has to make matters better, not worse. That's the basic idea when you're doing shit like this, right? So if we tip and pull, there we go. And then this is fading into the hair in a way that doesn't quite work. You can see how there's just a little bit too much body to that. So we're going to tip this and then bring this in. Let's shrink this. Tip this. Bring it down. Now we've got a little bit of a punch through here in the back, which is a concern. So we'll just do that, and we'll trust the tips are going to work out. So if we take a look, you can see how that works out pretty well. It hides the seam that we were worried about, and also creates a little bit more complexity so that we don't have just that one element repeating over and over. Here we've got another egregious seam, so we'll just hide that one too, with the same exact setup. So pull this down and forward because it's a smaller rig. And we'll take this opportunity to actually go against the grain a little bit, because that'll make it feel a little bit more like hair. If everything is combed perfectly, it'll feel a little less like hair. So by just having a little bit of scatter, we can do a little bit of, you know, not realistic hair, but hair that doesn't feel too fake. This might not work quite as well as I'd hoped because of the shape of that hair. I guess it's not too bad. I'm not sure I buy it. I guess it's fine. It's just not actually in the skull at all. Of course, neither was the previous one. All of these are a little bit above the skull. Either way, we have more hair. So let's go. Oh, you know what we should do? We should have this one go down instead. And cover this seam. I'll figure out the other one in a minute. I don't need this. That's a little too strong. And then here, we can just go down, pull it out, bring it in. It doesn't do a great job of disguising this bulge, but it's better than nothing. And it does a pretty good job of disguising the larger crease. Yeah, I think that helps. We still have a little patch you can see there, where from a specific angle the skull can be seen. I'm not too worried about that because the skull will be brown, whatever the color of the hair is. I'll make the scalp that color too. But there are some more egregious elements back here. I'm more concerned about the egregious elements in the front because the players are going to be seen from this angle in my game rather than from a rear perspective. But from the front, you can see that there's still this egregious piece of crap. So I think that our best bet for this is to actually make it work at the core level instead of trying to force it to work. If we shrink this, no, we extend this. There we go. So let's go ahead and run one more of these across this crease here. Thinking about Captain Spirit. I never played it because I don't really have any interest in video games about little boys because I was one. And For escapism, I don't really have any interest in being one again. That doesn't seem like it's taking me very far from my roots. Unless it's an alien little boy. But I don't think it is. I think it's played pretty straight. That's not quite enough, so let's just do a little bit. There we go. Let's give it a little bit more of a pop. Jojo says that the little boy has powers. Yeah, I am also looking forward to the new Spider-Man animated series. I don't have any problem with it as a video game. I just didn't choose to pick it up because I just didn't have any interest in the main character at all. That's pretty common for me, though. There are very few main characters these days that make me even slightly interested, but it is quite hard to make me care about a character that looks like every... Commander Keen, for example. If it looks like Commander Keen, which it does, same basic idea, I have a hard time because I already played Commander Keen. But I know that that's not really valid. Oh, it looks like something from 2 decades ago. What a ripoff. No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that I don't get excited for it because I've played games like that too many times. Oh, it's also free, yeah. I have plenty of games that are paid that I haven't really had a chance to play. All right, so that's going to be the core of our setup. What we're going to do now is build the flyaways. Flyaways are fun, and we can just use them to decorate places that don't need any help but could use a little bit of decoration. For example, right here. So what we can do with a flyaway is just create... There are a couple of ways to do it. One way is just to create one that's got way too much body and is like obviously... just extrude down here so that goes all the way down because it's going to be a noticeable one. And then just pop this out like that. And if you have a flyaway like something like that, you can get away with it'll look a little bit more lively. This is probably a little too much, so we're going to bring it down a little bit because that's just a little too much body. And this is one kind of flyaway. The other kind, with this kind of, I mean, we're not using opacity here, so we're very limited in the kinds of decorations we can do. But the other kind is that we can do just a one that's not actually connected to the rest there. So what we'll do is we'll bring this in here. And then we'll just cut this middle one out and then have it come around and be a scraggly little hair that just kind of goes wherever it goes. Now the only issue with this is that this is probably much too large. So we're going to shrink it down. And I think is it upside down? No, that's right. But I think we're going to want to edit the bevel because it's a little bit passive. So we're just going to bring these way up and then this in and this like that. There we are. That'll make it a little bit more noticeable. It's a little too triangular. Let's try it like that. Jojo says that you can be since the game has some flaws, I can also be snarky about it. I do love my snark. There's a new RPG coming out. I think it's by Square. It certainly looks like it's by Square, and it has some of the worst trailers and screenshots I've seen. And I can't wait to buy it so that I can talk about how bad the level design is. That's me. So this kind of element is fun, but you have to be careful to actually put it someplace where it doesn't cause any harm. Yeah, there we are. That's no longer causing any harm. And then what we can do is we can create one more down here to fill in this pretty egregious empty spot on the skull. And then what we'll do is we'll create one more flyaway, but it's going to be inside the hair. So we'll just duplicate this and bring it back like this, and this will be another flyaway. Dissolve that. Shrink the whole thing. And create ourselves a nice little flyaway. And then we're just going to want to put in just a touch down around the ears. Nope. Duplicated the wrong thing there. I think that this flyaway is a little bit improper. Let's try and put this in someplace a little bit better. So if we punch that through, and we do bring this down and then bring this up, can we make it come out here? Yeah, I think that'll be a little bit better. All right, so now this is a kind of hair. Right now it's just like loosely brushed back, but it could, or not even loosely, tightly brushed back, but it could also be tied and part of a ponytail or something like this. But you can see how this is just super basic in terms of how it's set up. It's all just hair that's going the same way. I don't know whether or not this looks good. I'm afraid that you guys will have to tell me. But keeping in mind that this is the angle it's likely to be seen from, would this be a Toon style haircut that you wouldn't mind seeing on your crew? You know, and if it's something that you would like to see improved, tell me what sort of improvements you would like to see in this kind of haircut. So I've been streaming for, wow, 2 hours plus, which is plenty. Jojo, so what's the hairstyle you're going for here? Well, right now it's just brushed straight back. The idea is there would be a ponytail, but I don't have time to make the ponytail today because it's late. So, you know, it's just got the straight brushed back look. Or tied back, however you want to put it. It's also very straight. I should probably talk about kinked hair, because this is actually not hard to do. You can kink the hair just by spinning a bunch. Come on. Wow, it's not really letting me spin today. Wonder what's up with this. Usually it's like, sure, spin all you'd like. There we are. So you can see that you can just twist the hair. This is not built for it, so the undersides don't look right. But when you do, you can see how it does twist. So this is not a very good hair for things like afros, but it would be good for lightly curled hair. Jojo Jet says he doesn't like the strands sticking up. So I'm not sure about that. I think that maybe this one is a little bit aggressive, the one I've got highlighted. But fundamentally, I think that we need some sticky outy bits. It's just a matter of how many before it becomes, egregious to look at. So how about I just lay that flat like that? Just a little bit. And this one too could be shrunk a little bit here. And brought forward and up. I think it'd be a little bigger than that. Well, hair design is not my forte, but it's something I've got to learn. So if you have any advice, let me know. Other than that, I will see all of you folks on Saturday or next week or whenever, and let me know whether or not... Jojo Jet says that he's never seen any hair stick up like that. Well, first off, it is toon hair, so it has to be a little exaggerated. And second off, I guess my family's hair is frizzier than your family's hair. Anyway, I will see you next week.